For me, the Yaris just has never been the most instantly appealing visually.
Now, mechanically speaking, what goes wrong?
Now, when it comes to driving, unfortunately, there are a few complaints. Okay, so surely a Yaris, or maybe a Vitz, depending on where you're watching this from, has to be one of the safest bets when it comes to buying a used car, right? Not only is it a Toyota, so surely that means bulletproof reliability, but it's one of the simplest and smallest models in the range, so surely that means nothing will go wrong with it. Well, that might not actually be the case, plus these things ask quite the premium on the used market, so are they worth it? Well, that's what we are here to find out, and to do that we need to find out what goes wrong with these things. Let's start with the exterior. Now, you'd think Toyota would have sorted this out by now because it has been a major issue on previous generations of not just the Yaris but plenty of their other cars, but the paint, or more specifically the clear coat, can fade. You'd think they would have sorted it by now. Now, the cars that are suffering from this fading issue, you'll generally find are living most of their lives outside and are hardly ever cleaned. Cars that are garaged and cleaned regularly, like this one, can look brand new for pretty much the rest of time. But in hot climates like here in Australia, the paint and clear coat, it doesn't seem to be all that resilient. But then in cold climates, rust can be a bit of an issue. We're not talking totally kill the car dead levels of corrosion, but where do you need to check? Well, firstly, pop the bonnet and check this front cross member, then check the engine mount on the front left side and the bolts around it. Also check the bolts holding the battery support in place. Actually, you know what? Just check the entire engine bay. Also, try to get under the car and check the lower cross member, around any of the suspension components, and really around anything that resembles a bolt. Then pop the tailgate and check around the entire boot aperture, but especially around this grommet, because this is known to rust. Now, the good news here compared to some European cars, where if you get water leaking into the car from here, it can result in a bunch of electronic issues, not in the Yaris. The worst thing that's going to happen is it's going to smell like wet dog. Now, again, in warm climates like Australia, we doubt you're going to find any rust or corrosion issues with a Yaris. If you do, it's probably poorly repaired accident damage. But in colder climates, especially with salted roads, just have a good look all over the car, check for signs of corrosion. Now, even though the Yaris does seem to be more impervious to electronic gremlins on the exterior compared to cars costing sometimes tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars more than this, we did come across a couple of little sporadic electronic issues with the exteriors. Again, we need to make this clear. These are not common issues, but we did find a couple of people complaining about some central locking and keyless entry issues. Also, another owner had a problem where the Windows anti-trap function kind of caught their arm. However, we think that owner might be mistaken because the anti-trap function of the car has nothing to do with the windows. It just means that the car refuses to play music that sounds like this. Anyway, about the only other thing you need to check with the exterior is which Yaris is going to suit your lifestyle best and which one you like the look of the most. What we mean by that is that prior to the first update in 2014, the Yaris could be had with 3 doors or 5. Post the update though, you're going to be stuck with 5. Plus, that update not only introduced a big swoopy looking front grille, Toyota changed over 900 parts. Extra soundproofing, a stiffer chassis, improved suspension calibrations, revised mechanical parts, and the features, equipment and interiors were all upgraded. Plus, there was a second update in 2017, but we'll get into the details of that and all the interior stuff when we get inside soon. And even though the 3-tier model range remained, no matter what iteration, what each trim spec was called changed. But something that didn't change across the entire life cycle of the car were the choice of a 1.3 or 1.5 litre engine. However, Australia missed out on some of the more interesting power plants. For example, some markets received a 1.5 litre hybrid Yaris. Actually, we sort of did too. It's just that here it's called the Prius C and it is ostensibly a hybrid Yaris. Then in Japan, where this generation of Yaris is called the Vitz, they were treated to a range of special models including all-wheel drive variants, plus the Vitz RSGs and the Vitz GR. And they both featured a host of go-fast bits, not to mention the Vitz GRMN that featured a turbocharged 1.5 litre engine. However, arguably the spiciest and most special of this generation didn't come out of Japan. It was made in France. We're talking about the second GRMN variant that featured the same 1.8 litre supercharged four-cylinder that you'll find hiding in the back of a Lotus Elise, plus additional welding points, heavily upgraded brakes and suspension components, chassis reinforcements, and all of the aesthetic details that make this thing a very, very special little car. And in even better news, thanks to the world of grey importing, you can get that second generation GRMN car here in Australia, although it could be asking north of $50,000. And for that money, instead you could buy a GR Yaris, which is all-wheel drive and a homologation special, and you'll probably have money left over. But look, aside from the incredibly rare and special import models, Yaris here in Australia on the used market currently range from about $3,000 to about $25,000. But as I alluded to at the start, a Yaris, it can ask quite the premium over the competition. Take a 2017 Volkswagen Polo. These things retailed for around about the $22,000 mark when new. These days, with around 70,000 kilometers on the clock, will swap hands for around about $12,000. That's a drop of $10,000. And when you compare that to, say, an equivalent year, kilometer and trim spec Yaris, generally they were asking about $2,000 less than the Polo, but on the used market these days, they can swap hands for $18,000. That's only a drop in value of about $3,000 to $4,000. And look, yes, the Toyota has a larger support network, parts and running costs are most likely going to be cheaper, and it has a better power to weight ratio, but the Polo is probably better equipped, arguably nicer to drive, and I think we can all agree it wins the comparison when talking about image and exterior design. Actually, this is an area that I've always felt the Yaris sort of struggles a bit compared to the competition, like a Honda Jazz or a Mazda 2 or even a Suzuki Swift. For me, the Yaris just has never been the most instantly appealing visually. In saying that, for me, these pre-update cars are a damn sight more attractive than the post-update with the big swoopy front grille thing. Also, being lowered and wearing a sexy set of wheels certainly doesn't hurt the visuals of this one. Now inside, we'll get into what this interior is like to live with in a second, but the first of the common issues that you need to know about, unfortunately and typical for Toyota, it's these bloody rubbish infotainment systems. Now, the infotainment system, it can vary depending on the year, model and trim spec of the car, but no matter what, they're all pretty shit. Even the most recent generations of the infotainment system missed out on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but no matter what iteration of car you're looking at, there are complaints about the interface just being really slow and it just feels generations old. Earlier systems can have problems with Bluetooth connectivity, the voice command is rubbish, and if you're on a phone call to anybody, it sounds like the microphone's made out of potato. Even just the sound system itself, no matter if it's the 4-speaker or 6-speaker sound system, they seem to have no desire to actually sound any good. Even the sound deadening, especially in the doors, it is lacking, so the whole thing can sound horrible. And look, we understand that for many of you, the car not coming with Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, that can be a deal breaker from the get-go, but it doesn't need to be. See, loads of owners like Shannon that owns this car have ditched the standard infotainment system and fitted quality aftermarket products. That means you can get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, you can update the quality of the rear view camera, even fit front and rear parking sensors, you can get the latest in wireless phone connectivity and so much more. Plus, upgrading the speakers and just fitting more sound deadening, honestly, it makes a huge difference. Actually, this stuff won't just improve a Yaris. Loads of cars will really appreciate this sort of makeover. And if you do need these parts, well, you've just got to hit that Automotive Superstore link down below. And it's not just the infotainment stuff either. As this car proves, lowering a car and fitting some sexy wheels can completely transform it. Maybe you want some towing accessories, or you want to fit some driving lights or a dash cam. Maybe you want some quality car care products to stop the paint fading. Automotive Superstore carries over 400,000 different parts and accessories from over 500 different manufacturers. And for ultimate peace of mind, everything comes with a fitment guarantee and a full manufacturer's warranty. Honestly, whatever you need, hit that link below. But what else can go wrong in here? Apparently nothing else. Okay, we did find the odd sporadic report of some door handle breakage issues or the window switches playing up, or maybe an indicator stalk not like self-correcting after a turn, but these are sporadic, not common complaints at all. Actually, you know what? Unlike plenty of this car's European competition, like the Polo or a Renault Clio or maybe a Skoda Fabia that can have a range of electronic gremlins, not to mention some issues with resilience, the Yaris seems to be pretty much bulletproof. Actually, just on the resilience of these things, this is where plenty of owners complimented the Yaris. Yes, everything short of the carpet and the seats is just hard plastics all over the place, but this therefore means it's incredibly resilient. Actually, our resident mechanic Jim uses this generation Yaris as his courtesy vehicles for his business, because if any interior can cop abuse, it's one of these. Although, I suppose the only negative to that is that it can feel a bit cheap in here, especially compared to, say, a Mazda 2 or a Polo. Those cars' interiors, they can feel a little bit more premium. Even for the Mazda have this brilliant way of taking sort of cheap plastics but giving it textures that makes it feel more premium than it actually is. There are some interesting textures in here, but they certainly don't feel premium. And look, yes, the later post-update cars, they did improve the interior materials somewhat. They still don't feel expensive. However, the seats and the seat comfort, you'd think this would be kind of a horrible place to sit, right? No, these seats are genuinely supportive and comfortable. I actually have a lot of experience in this. One of Jim's Yaris that I borrowed to get from Newcastle to Brisbane, that's like an 8-hour trip each way. I drove one of these, and at no point did my bum get numb. I didn't get any pins and needles in my legs or anything. Okay, got out of the car, had a little bit of a stretch, but considering I did 16 hours of driving in 2 days, it was actually really comfortable. However, as nice as the seats were, there were some other issues with my body on that trip. I had a Yaris-induced injury, but we'll get to that when we get to driving this. But look, overall ergonomics in here, pretty bloody good. Everything's easy to touch, everything's in the right spot. It's just a good little car to live with inside. Even when it comes to places to hide and store all your stuff, really, really good. There's an okay sized glove box there. There's a little bookshelf there in case you read tiny novels. On some models, there's even more storage under this side of the passenger side dashboard area. 2 cup holders here with a removable divider, so that can be an even bigger storage area with storage for your phone behind that. Now, I do feel like Toyota just took any sort of flat surface and went, quick, let's make that storage, but they didn't actually think about it, because all of these things, they just now collect life's filth and crap. Same with here in the door bins, but they're very, very small and again, scratchy plastic, so any hard bottles are going to rattle around in there. Little storage cubby hole here. You're never going to use that for anything. Same as up here, you're never going to use this for anything. Put your burner phone here, another cup holder here, and another storage bin, which is technically for the back. We'll get to that in a second. Also, as I mentioned before, look, chances are a Polo is going to come better equipped than a Yaris in standard form. In saying that, a Kia Rio or a Hyundai Accent, they pretty much blow everything out of the water in terms of bang for your buck for how much features and equipment you get. But still, the Yaris is relatively well equipped. Also, as far as safety goes, pretty good news. All Yaris of this generation feature a 5-star ANCAP safety rating. However, if safety is a high priority for you, make sure you check out a post-2017 ZR model, because they feature a bunch of extra safety bells and whistles. We're talking autonomous emergency braking, auto high beam, and lane departure alerts. Or you could just learn to drive properly so you don't have to rely on any of these things in the first place. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly 16 centimeters taller than pointless and forgotten celebrity Yaris Hilton. This is in my driving position, and it's okay. Honda Jazz leaves this thing for dead, honestly. I've got a good amount of foot room, but my legs are kind of smashed up against the back of the seat. Seats are relatively comfortable. It's starting to rain outside, so sorry about the audio. It's an okay place to be. As far as features and practicality back here, you've got pockets on the backs of the seats. You can share this bin here, I suppose. That's it. I should mention, on the 5-door models, you do get a little bit more practicality back here, but in the 3-door, limited, very limited. And then as far as practicality in the boot goes, you know what? It's pretty much average. It's actually pretty much exactly the average for this class of car, which means it cannot match a Honda Jazz for practicality in the boot, but you know, very, very few cars can. However, there are some cool little design highlights. This floor is adjustable, so when the seats are down, you end up with an actual flat floor, but then you can remove or you drop the floor section to give you even more boot space as well, but then you end up with a bit of a load lip. But I think it's a really intelligent choice from Toyota. Although unfortunately, it seems that you may not have made an intelligent choice, because of everybody that watches our videos, something like 75% of you haven't subscribed to ReDriven. But if you hit that subscribe button, it means that we can make more free content for you. So why would you deny yourself of that? Hit that subscribe button and make it a brighter future for all of us. Better yet, why not check out our membership program by hitting the link down there for even more perks. Plus, if you are in the market for one of these Yaris, make sure you head to ReDriven.com and check out the free cheat sheet, because we've listed out all of the common problems and so much more about the car. If you're in the market, it is an absolute must read. Check it out. Now, when it comes to driving, unfortunately, there are a few complaints. Firstly, it does seem that Toyota opted for the very cheapest suspension components they could get, because in terms of ride quality, in standard form, pretty bloody average. Look, don't get me wrong, it's not dangerous at all, and there are plenty of other cars on the market that have worse suspension calibrations, but we do highly recommend popping some cash aside and maybe paying for a suspension upgrade like this car has had done, because it can completely transform the car for the better. Now, the next complaint, look, obviously Toyota have engineered this thing to be as easy to live with as possible, but plenty of owners have complained that the weight, or maybe the spring resistance to the accelerator and the clutch in manual examples, and even the gear shift, they're so light and so vague, it actually makes it more of a challenge to live with than it should. Even in the automatic models, it feels like Toyota have used the lightest possible rubber band to keep the accelerator from hitting the floor, and it's super annoying when driving because the pedal's just way too light. Actually, I have a story on this with one of the Yaris of Jim's that I was driving back and forth from Brisbane. Because it didn't have cruise control, I sort of had to hold my foot in the air on the accelerator to try to keep it the steady 110 kilometers an hour. Otherwise, if I relaxed, you just start accelerating above the speed limit. And this is where I got my Yaris-induced injury from, because after a few hours, my shin, my whole lower leg was just in agony. Now, these pedal weights, and even in the manual examples with the shift, these can be fixed, as this car has. These pedals and the shifter do feel far more positive and a bit more weighty, so it's nicer to use. But another complaint owners have had, and I totally agree, I found this when I was driving back on the freeway, is the lack of sound deadening in here at freeway speeds becomes very apparent. In other words, it can get really noisy in here at freeway speeds. But a compliment to the Yaris, that freeway trip, it was pissing down with rain and the car never felt unsafe. It felt really secure on the road the whole time. Also, massive compliment to Jim for fitting that Yaris with Wipertech wiper blades instead of OEM or aftermarket ones. And that's because Wipertech wiper blades are far superior to all of the other ones. They're a breeze to order online, they're so simple to fit, they wipe incredibly well, and they are the only wiper blades that we choose to use. Actually, you know what? Get yourself a set right now, hit the link below, because you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. But look, while we're talking about brilliant things, aside from those few tiny complaints about the driving experience, overall, a Yaris is just an awesome car to drive. Look, obviously at the daily duty stuff, the Yaris absolutely nails it. The vision out of it is great. It's super easy to judge the size of the car. Acceleration's good for what it is. It's easy to park, good in traffic. It nails that brief. However, if you are trying to decide between the two engine choices and you're thinking about going the 1.3 litre because surely it's more fuel efficient than the 1.5, that's not necessarily the case. Now look, obviously this will vary depending on how you drive and even where you drive, but Jim runs both the 1.3 and 1.5 litre Yaris on the fleet, and it's interesting because the 1.5 tends to return better fuel economy figures. This might be because the 1.5 has a little bit more power and torque to it, so you don't have to rev it out and drive it so hard to get anywhere. Get the 1.5. But when it comes to driving, there are two things that no one seems to talk about. Number one, they can be so much fun to drive. We see these on track days all the time. And secondly, being a Toyota Yaris, you kind of drive around with this subconscious feeling that you're almost bulletproof. Like surely nothing's going to go wrong with the reliability. So you are going to get to wherever you need to go. Or will you? Are these rumors of phenomenal reliability to be believed? What can actually go wrong with these mechanically? Look, I can't tell you, I'm sorry, because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but Jim is.
As Adam mentioned, yes, I've been using these things for years as courtesy cars. I've had 8 of them over the years, and they have accumulated over 500,000 kilometres in that time, and they've been driven by everyone all day, every day. And I can count the amount of mechanical failures or parts I've had to replace because of mechanical failure on one hand. Actually, I wish this hand was smaller because there is actually less than 5 things. We've had to replace an air conditioning compressor, an air conditioning evaporator. We've had to do a coil on one, and we've had to do a variable valve timing solenoid. That's it. Other than wear and tear items, not counting brakes and tyres and consumables, that is the only failures we've had. And again, these things have been driven by hundreds, possibly thousands of people, and I can't imagine basically how they get treated. So it's incredible, really. And in doing the research and considering the larger market here, it really just does back up our experience. These things are just very, very reliable. Maybe one of the most reliable cars you actually can get.
So do we think you should buy a used Yaris? Well, let's put it this way. Jim's Workshop is one of many that we know that use Yaris as their courtesy vehicles for their customers. So think about it. If actual mechanics are willing to lend these out to every Tina, Deepak and Jorge to treat in God knows what ways, surely they're more than worthy enough for you. And it's at this point in the video that we would normally recommend you only consider cars that have the most faultless of service histories and that have been clearly maintained to the highest levels. But with the Yaris, these things are so resilient, as long as it hasn't been completely neglected or clearly abused, well, chances are it's going to be a bloody good thing. And look, obviously get a full pre-purchase inspection carried out and only get the best Yaris that you can possibly afford. But if you're after a car in this class, this has to be at the very, very pointy end of the list. But then again, so should this. But I've got a favour to ask you. If you already own a Yaris of this generation, can you let us know what your ownership experience has been like down in the comments? That way any potential buyers of a Yaris can do even more research down there. If they are garaged around this grommet, overall pretty good.